For those that don't know me, my name is David Eland, and I'm the CEO of Northern New South Wales Football. I want to sincerely thank you for taking part in our webinar tonight, and I'm sure that that appreciation is also extended from the club. Certainly, all of your players and everyone else involved in the club. Your commitment to tune in tonight and hear Craig Hamilton's story is certainly greatly appreciated. I just thought I'd kick off tonight by explaining why football, why Northern New South Wales Football in particular, is committing to a mental health round. Look, unfortunately, our sport locally has been impacted by the tragedy of suicide in recent years. It's touched a number of our clubs, and it's just a reminder that football's not immune to that tragedy. And so we certainly want to leverage football status within our community. Across Northern New South Wales Football, we've literally got tens of thousands of people involved in our game. In fact, on any given weekend throughout Northern New South Wales, there could be a couple of 100,000 people involved in our game. And there is absolutely no doubt that there's going to be people in our football community that are struggling with mental illness. And so we want to break that stigma. We want to make sure that we're doing our bit to communicate to the football community that there's nothing wrong with that. That football clubs are there to help, and that we're there to have conversations. So that's what Mental Health Round is all about. It's about using our communication channels to break down that stigma and to encourage people not to suffer with mental illness, to reach out and help. Last year was all about awareness. Obviously, COVID was a huge challenge for us. But this year, we're running a number of activities, and it's all linked to our strategic plan and our strategic priority of building the capacity of our clubs and our volunteers. And so there's a really good alignment here. We're hoping with Craig's session, another couple of sessions that we're running throughout the week, and also a course that Lifeline are going to provide people with access to. We're sincerely hoping that we are going to lift the capacity of our clubs and our team officials and our volunteers to identify and to provide that initial assistance to people in their club that reach out for help. So that's where it fits in with football. In case anyone was wondering, why we're involved, it's certainly not because we don't have enough going on. But we see this as a serious issue within our community, and as I said, has really had a tragic impact upon clubs, and we're just not prepared to sit back and leave it up to other people. So we really take our responsibilities as leaders within our community. We take that very, very seriously. So it is fantastic to have Craig Hamilton with us tonight. He really needs no introduction, particularly to people that live within the Hunter region. And I'm certainly not going to steal Craig's thunder. I'm going to let him tell his story. But Craig has got a really powerful story about his challenges with mental illness and how he has overcome them. And Craig is a well-respected broadcaster, and he's also an advocate for mental illness. So it's an absolute pleasure to have Craig involved with us tonight. We're also going to be joined tonight by Patrick Calabria, and Patrick is the Senior Business Development Manager for Lifeline. And Lifeline are our key partner for Mental Health Round. As I said to you before, one of the key objectives of Mental Health Round is to make sure that clubs and also members of our football community know where they can reach help. And Lifeline have just got such a proud history of making such a massive contribution in this area. So I'm going to hand over to Patrick in just a couple of minutes, who's going to introduce Lifeline. And he's also going to talk about an online course that Lifeline are going to make available to the football community as well. And Northern New South Wales Football is going to provide a subsidy of 50% just to encourage as many volunteers as possible. So that's enough from me. You certainly haven't got on the webinar to listen to an administrator speak, but I just hope that provides you with some background. Please bear with me tonight. This is my first webinar, and I'm going to do my best to do all the button pushing here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to connect, again, Patrick Calabria from Lifeline, who's going to introduce Lifeline, maybe introduce Craig a little bit, and talk to you about an online resource that we're making available. So,
thank you, David. Very, very pleased to be here this evening, and very honoured to be a part of this initiative for Mental Health Round for 2021. Basically, we started this initiative in 2020 during the height of COVID, when the mental health pledge came out from Northern New South Wales Football, and I couldn't be prouder to be a part of what is going on with Northern New South Wales Football and the Mental Health Round, because we at Lifeline have a vision of Australia free of suicide, a society where no one person feels like they have to face their darkest moments alone. For many, it can be hard to reach out and ask for help. Feelings of embarrassment, failure, or overwhelming helplessness can impact our ability to initiate contact and instigate the help that we need. Thankfully, awareness and acceptance of mental health issues in our community continues to grow. And that's why, as you mentioned, David, we're looking at a course that's available to the volunteers and the coaching and the players and those who want to be involved, which is a mental health and wellbeing course. It's an evidence-based and practice-informed awareness course that defines and explains the current concepts and thinking around staying mentally healthy and the factors that support mental wellness. It highlights the importance of managing stress and building resilience, and how to put that into practice, equipping participants with the tools to work towards taking responsibility for their own wellbeing. This course is open to everyone. You don't need any pre-existing skills or knowledge to take part. It's a 90-minute self-paced e-learning course. That meaning you can do it anytime you want, basically via your laptop or phone. The course is usually at a cost of $50. Northern New South Wales Football has been very generous to subsidise 50% of this course, so at a cost now of $25. And the link will be available to any participants that are interested as of tomorrow, which we'll have emailed out to anyone. Lifeline, just to touch on, I guess, what we offer in our services. Most people know us for our 13 11 14 number, which runs 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Available in Newcastle and the Hunter. On top of that, if anybody does want to seek assistance, we do have a free face-to-face counselling service, which is available via our office there at Newcastle, and also telehealth as well for those who basically want to do it via video counselling as well. So that's just some of the services that we do have available from the Newcastle office. I'd like to pass over to Craig. Craig, I've met a few times through my work at Lifeline, and I've had the pleasure to hear him speak. And I tell you, Craig's story is one that is absolutely amazing. I'm very proud to be a part of this and to be alongside Craig as he's about to tell you this story. And Craig, I'd like to pass on to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And I'd like to start tonight simply by thanking David Eland and also the board of Northern New South Wales Football for this initiative, which I think is fantastic. It's groundbreaking in many ways to have a whole week of sport dedicated to a round when the subject is mental illness and mental health. I just think it's groundbreaking. We wouldn't have been doing this 5 years ago. We certainly wouldn't have been doing it 2 years ago, because we're still in many ways bringing down those barriers that Patrick talked about in the area of stigma around anything to do with mental illness. Now, I'm going to tell you my story, and for those of you who haven't heard it before, I've been speaking now for over 15 years in this area, in this mental health space. And I keep doing it, and I never get bored with doing it, because I recognise how important it is, and how sometimes if the messages don't get through and the education and the awareness isn't there, then the worst possible scenario, as David touched on, can be suicide. And this is one of my pet areas, is to reduce the suicide rate and to make people so aware that there's help there and you can get through it, because I've walked the road. I mean, I don't sit here tonight saying, oh, look, I know what it would be like, or I know what it's like for someone to feel suicidal, because I felt suicidal. I know what those feelings are like, but I also know there's a road back from there, and I've been walking that road for 20 years. And today I feel fantastic, and 95% of the time I feel fantastic. I've had to work at it. I continue to work at it, and I've had to make a lot of changes as well in my life to gain an equilibrium, to be well most of the time. I still have a mental illness. I still have bipolar 1 disorder. I was diagnosed 21 years ago with bipolar 1 disorder. It's not something that you can cure. It's a management illness, but with the right tools and the right support, you can live very, very well and be successful at what you do. So at the end of the session, I want each and every one of you to know that mental health problems, mental illness is common. It's far more common than any of us would ever realise. There is a road back. There is recovery, and people recover every day, and they get back on the horse, even though at some stage they may well have felt there is no way back, I'll never recover. And they may have employers who think the same, and so this particular employee is never going to be able to fulfil that role again. Well, I think I'm living proof there, because I did have a supportive employer at the ABC, and I was very fortunate to have a supportive employer. But I think I've paid that debt back since then by probably being a better employee today, because I know myself a lot better. So in saying those few opening remarks, I would like to tell you the road that I've been on, the journey, if you like, that I've been on in the last 21 years. A little bit of background. I grew up in Singleton on a dairy farm. My dad was a dairy farmer. I was there milking cows from the age of about 12 through until 18, when I left school. I finished my HSC in Singleton, and then I needed a job. The only jobs that were going at the time were mining jobs, and I applied and got a mine job, an underground mining job, literally 5 minutes from where we are broadcasting from tonight, over at a mine called Stockton Borehole at Taralba. So then I was a miner for 16 years and got an opportunity to experience some broadcasting work, and I decided I love this, and I've been there ever since, pretty much. When I was 37 years of age, I had no reason to be depressed. I had the best friends that anyone could want. I didn't have any money worries. I had a great family. I had a job I loved, and yet I became depressed. I started to become depressed in the early part of 2000, and it started slowly. It was not something that hit me overnight. You don't go to bed one night feeling great and then wake up the next day clinically depressed. My experience, and the experience of others that I've spoken to, is it's a gradual slide into a depression, and this was my experience. I felt at the beginning of 2000, in January, that my sleep pattern was all over the place. I would regularly wake up at 11 o'clock at night and be unable to get back to sleep. And then when I did get back to sleep by about 2, I'd be awake again at 4. That's the first signs for me that there were problems, that interrupted sleep pattern. I lost my appetite. I had no energy. I was fatigued all the time. I was unable to concentrate on the basic tasks that, you think about the things that you would do day to day and not even have to think about. Well, I had similar roles to play in my work, and these things at that time were taking twice as long. So the cognitive impact on my brain was quite severe. So I was impaired there, and this is also part of depression. I became very withdrawn and very socially isolated at that time. I didn't want to see people. I didn't want to answer the phone. I didn't want to open the front door. I was putting on a pretty brave face to everyone in my life at that time, whether it was with friends or with family or at work. If someone asked me how I was, I would always say I was fine. Now, by the time February rolled around and March rolled around, all of these symptoms were getting worse. They weren't getting better, they were getting worse. And I'd done nothing about it. I told no one that I was experiencing these symptoms, and I didn't go and see anyone. Then go and see a doctor about the way I was feeling. And that, with the information I've got now, is that I should have been at the doctor right then, at the end of February, at the very latest, because by then I'd experienced 8 weeks worth of disrupted sleep, poor concentration, lack of, poor diet, no appetite, concentration problems, fatigue, had been going on for 8 weeks and getting worse. I should have been at a doctor then, and I wasn't. And I didn't go and get and see someone for the same reasons that most people don't, and particularly men. We are our own worst enemies in this scenario. We don't go because we have egos. We don't go because we have pride. We're proud of the fact that we're tough, strong individuals, and we can manage, and we will get through any sort of problem like this. And we're embarrassed. We're embarrassed and we're ashamed that something like this could stop us in our tracks. And you don't want to be that person. And I was all of those things. I ticked every box. So I didn't go and see anybody. So March rolled around, April rolled around, and I'm getting worse all the time, and May and June and then July. And I'm in a really bad state by July. In fact, my depression was so great in July that I was barely functioning. I was struggling to get out of bed. My anxiety levels were through the roof. I had burning sensations across both shoulders and in the middle of my back, just like literally a burning sensation. And that's how anxiety impacted on me. I mean, some people's heart rates go up when they're anxious. Some people get sweaty palms when they're anxious. Well, for me, it was this burning sensation, and it was horrendous. I never thought anxiety could be serious or impact on you, but it did. It was horrendous, and to go alongside an acute depression was torture. And so anyone who's been through it, I have a great empathy for. Because I know how challenging it is. So I still don't get myself to a doctor, and by mid-July I'm suicidal, and I'm having suicidal thoughts. And for me, and the person that I knew myself to be, I thought I knew myself to be, that was impossible. That was an impossible place to be, that I could be feeling like that, have these thoughts intermittently just come into a stream of consciousness across your thought pattern through the day, that this depression and this anxiety, the despair is so acute and the emotional pain is so acute and the hopelessness that it's not going to get better. It's not going to improve. In fact, it's continuing to get worse every day, that I'm thinking, well, I can't live like this. I cannot continue to live like this. Thank God I got to a doctor at that time. I think, and my family at that stage had no idea at all that I was in this state. No, they knew I wasn't well, and I think work knew that I wasn't well, but they had absolutely no idea that I was in a suicidal frame of mind. And that's when depression can be so great that it gets dangerous. And that because you're in that place, you're then relying on other people to intervene. They can't intervene if they don't know there's a problem. And that's why I continue to talk about the importance of talking to someone, sharing the load with someone. If it's not a doctor, if it's not a psychologist, if it's not a psychiatrist, if it's not a counsellor, if it's not a friend, then find a work colleague, find the boss, but talk to somebody and share the load. You'll feel a weight off your shoulders straight away the moment that you actually have that conversation. But at least then you've got someone in your corner that can check in with you and say, every day, how are you going today? And to make sure you get an opportunity to go and see someone, go and see a GP, go and see a psychologist. So that was my experience of depression. And as I said, I finally got to, I think I was dragged kicking and screaming to the doctor because I didn't want to go, even though I felt like that. And the doctor diagnosed me with clinical depression in 2 minutes. It was literally that quickly. He said, why are you here? And I said, well, look, I'm here because I can't sleep. I said, I'm not eating. I can't concentrate. I'm fatigued all the time. I have negative thoughts. I have despairing thoughts. I'm acutely stressed. And in the last 2 weeks, I've had suicidal thoughts. And the doctor simply said, you have clinical depression. And he went on to say, don't think your situation is unique. Don't think you are the only person who has ever sat in the seat you're in now and told me that story. He said, it's so common. He said, I'm not downplaying the seriousness of your depression. You are severely depressed and we need to treat you today. And I'll start treating you today. But these things are far more common than you realise. Up until that point, I thought I was the only person in the world that could feel this bad. And so in some strange way, to have a GP saying, look, you're not the only one. There's many others who get as depressed as you are. And the very tragic thing is, the very sad thing is that there's many others who feel even more depressed and actually do go to the next step and take their own lives. The suicide rate in Australia is disgraceful. There are double the number of suicides in this country every year than there are road deaths. So that gives you a bit of an idea of the size of the problem that we're talking about here. Double the number. And we have all of these great messages that, we read about, which are all valuable messages like, don't speed, drive a reviver, take care in wet conditions, don't drink and drive, don't drive under the influence of drugs. All good messages. Double the number of suicides in Australia every year. So that's another reason I keep doing what I'm doing. My story is only half finished because I've got to tell the bipolar bit now. I put on medication that day for depression. and it takes at least 5 weeks to work. Now, I was at the time was thinking this will be the Panadol effect. I will take an antidepressant, and then in 2 hours' time, I won't be depressed. Well, that's not how they work, unfortunately. And 3 or 4 days after I started taking this medication, I actually felt worse. And so I was in a terrible state by then, because I'm thinking that here's the tablet, here's the medication that is actually going to make me feel better, and now I feel worse 3 days after starting the program. Thankfully, after about a week or 10 days, I did start to feel better. I started to sleep better. And then I had this ray of hope, this ray of light, a bit of sunshine underneath the door that said, no, you're on the mend. And across the next 3 or 4 weeks, I steadily improved to a point within 5 weeks, I was back to how I am today. So the recovery from depression after 7 months of torture was played out over 5 weeks. But the further you leave depression before you get it treated or before you see someone, the longer it is out of the back end. The deeper the depression, the longer it takes to come out of, and that was my experience too. You don't know for sure, but I believe that had I seen somebody in March and had the problem addressed then I may not have, my depression may not have, gone to the depths that it did. So my depression, I recovered from then. I'd had a month off work by that stage. The doctor said, you cannot work like this. You need to have some time off. So I did. Then I went back to work. Now, within 5 weeks, I was high. I was manic, and eventually I was psychotic. Now, those are the symptoms of someone with a bipolar disorder. And a bipolar disorder is both sides of the spectrum. Bipolar, it's actually a very good name to describe how it manifests. When you're manic and you're psychotic, you're on the North Pole. When you're clinically depressed and suicidal, you're on the South Pole. So I'd already been to the South Pole, and now I was on my way to the North Pole. And the signs and symptoms of that, you actually feel very good when you're manic. And this is the trick with the other side of bipolar, is that when you start to go high, and you actually feel better than normal. It's probably a good way of describing it. If we all live in normal mood, and everyone's mood fluctuates, by the way, nobody flat lines. We're always, sometimes you're a little bit better than normal. You bounce out of bed, you go to work, you feel great. Other days you feel like sleeping in and not going. You still get up and go. So there's that mood fluctuation. But with bipolar disorder, if you've got a bipolar 1 disorder or even a bipolar 2 disorder, the swings are greater. The depression swing hits the floor, and then the manic swing hits the roof. And there's a heck of a lot of, there's a trail of debris left behind those swings. So, as I said, if let's call 0 the good mood, halfway, the equator, halfway between North Pole, South Pole, I'm starting to go north, and I'm, say, +1, and then I become +2. And when you get to +2, you talk a lot, you're highly energetic, you've got a whole heap of ideas, you very confident in yourself, you start to think that no one else has got the right answers, that you have the right answers. And this mood for me went into +3, where you're becoming generally manic by that stage, and you're moving really fast, talking lots, having lots of ideas. There might be reckless behaviour in there at +3 or +4. There could be an increase in drug taking, an increase in Alcohol consumption, increase in partying, spending money is another big one. Money often people don't have, booking holidays they don't need, buying cars, buying real estate, all of those sort of things can happen when you're in the up phase of bipolar disorder. Now, I crashed out in a big way in 3 days before the Olympics in 2000, so it was September. And I was on a train station in Newcastle at Broadmeadow, and I was about to get on a train to go down to Sydney to work on the Sydney Olympics as a commentator. I had a media pass around my neck, I had my bags with me, and here I am, I'm psychotic. And this is all about to turn very ugly very quickly, and yet no one knows I'm in that state, least of all me. I think I'm fine, I really do, and that's the trouble with this. Family members were a bit concerned, I've got to say, they were a bit concerned, but they weren't hugely concerned. If they're hugely concerned, then I don't get on the train. I'm not there at the station. If they're hugely concerned, I'm back at the doctor, but everything appeared to be okay. But I'm psychotic. And that psychosis, I'm waiting for the train, and that psychosis then tipped into a rather aggressive state, and I became aggressive. And I don't mean physically aggressive. That's not ever been someone I've been. But I became verbally aggressive to anybody who I saw, strangers, people who were working on the railway station that day, and even a friend who happened to be catching the same train, who I saw just as a sheer coincidence. I started to get verbally aggressive to him. Now, when that happened, he knew there was a problem because that was out of character. I'm very thankful he was there that day. So he quickly spoke to the guards on duty. They stopped the trains into Broadmeadow both ways, and they rang the mental health crisis team. And the mental health crisis team, as soon as they found out, it was a 37-year-old male who weighed about 85 kilos, who was very aggressive on a train station, they said, call the police. We can't handle that. 20 years on, that's still the case. Not much has changed. If you have those situations, that situation, it'll still be a police matter. So I remember the police arriving very clearly as though it was yesterday. Even though I was really unwell, I still remember the police pulling up. I still remember 4 uniformed guys getting out of a paddy wagon and coming over to me on the platform, very professionally, very calmly, doing their job because they'd done this job 100 times, hundreds of times before. This was nothing new. They weren't walking into a situation and going, we don't know what to do with this bloke. They knew exactly what to do with this bloke because it was par for the course for the police, and they did a fantastic job. The end game was I ended up in the back of a paddy wagon that day. I ended up handcuffed that day. And I ended up taking a 15-minute paddy wagon ride to the James Fletcher Hospital, which is up the top of, or was at the top of Watt Street at the time, and now it's down at the Mater in Waratah. So, and within about half an hour, I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. That's, that from that day, it was the road back, build me back into good health, and it took a long time. Because I was busted. I was busted big time. The eggs were scrambled. I had another 3 months off work, and I was medicated from that day, not with antidepressants, because if you're high, you don't need an antidepressant. You need something to bring you down. So totally different medication. I take the same medication today as the medication they put me on at James Fletcher that day. So how do you get back from that? Well, a couple of years after that, in the 2 years after that, I read a lot. I read a lot about bipolar. I read a lot about depression. I read a lot about just mental illness in general. I found out so much about it, but most of it was I was trying to get to know myself and what made me tick and what were my triggers and how to minimise my stress. And the big thing here what I would say to you is most of the time, well, certainly for me, it's not the same in every situation, but certainly for me, I never owned my stress. I never owned it. I was never part of the equation prior to 2000. If I was stressed prior to 2000, it was someone else's fault. I'm stressed because of you. I'm stressed because of that. I'm stressed because this was said it would be done and it's not. So I am stressed. Now, the first place I start is with me. What role am I playing here? And then we work away from there. So I've had to learn a lot of, I suppose, tools and techniques along the way. A number of things I've done is yoga. In the last 20 years, I've done meditation in the last 20 years. Both have been effective for keeping me in the middle ground where I need to be. I've changed my alcohol intake. I was a classic binge drinker through my sporting days. I was a cricketer and a rugby player. And it was my, reputation, my relationship with alcohol was I could go weeks and weeks without having a drink. And then when I did have a drink, I wouldn't go home, or I'd be home very late. And that was non-sustainable. And I also recognised at that time that this is counterproductive, completely counterproductive to good mental health. So these days, I'm not teetotal. I'll have a glass of wine, I'll have a couple of beers, but the days of the big drinking days are well and truly over. My mental health has never been better since I made that decision. I eat better, my diet is better. I'm very conscious about eating good, nutritious food. I don't eat fast food. I stay hydrated. I never paid any attention to hydration before. It's incredibly important for good mental health. It's incredibly important and part of the football community. I don't have to tell you, any of you, how important hydration is, but for mental health, it is incredibly important as well. Dehydration doesn't serve physical or mental health well. Exercise, I got a bit sedentary, I got a bit lazy for a while. Exercise has been fantastic. I've got back to I do boxing 2 or 3 times a week now, and it's just the best exercise. The knees and ankles don't allow running anymore. So boxing works it's high intensity. It doesn't take a long time to do it. And it really is that's where the natural endorphins are. So I do a lot of those things these days to stay well. The talking part of it came, and I will say at this stage too, if any of you online have any questions, I'm here to answer those questions too at the end of this presentation. But why talk? That's a good question. Why would I not, after all this, get back on my feet, dust myself off, and just move on into the sunset and hope no one saw that train wreck that just happened? I thought about doing that for a while because I was still embarrassed, still very embarrassed. But it's not a story that I could hide anyway, because it was a very public breakdown at the Royal Meadow Railway Station. I was on the way to the Olympics, and when you're on the ABC and you're working in the media, and I was broadcasting rugby league at the time, and you're known, and when something like that happens on a public railway station, it doesn't take very long in Newcastle for that story to get around. So I didn't have a choice in remaining anonymous. I didn't have a choice in remaining silent about it. I just had to deal with it. But then about 18 months down the track, I thought I got 2 choices here. One, in terms of mental health awareness and education, I can either be part of the solution or I can be part of the problem. And the problem has always been the silence. It's always been the embarrassment. It's always been the shame. It's always been the fact that no one's been prepared to tell their story and destigmatise this whole area. So I thought I got that choice, or I'll be part of the problem, or you can be part of the solution. And part of the solution for me was to tell my story, to share it. Around about 2004, I wrote a book called Broken Open, which initially I didn't want to write, but I had a publisher chasing me who knew about my story and said, look, you've got to write this. This is it's an incredible story. And part of what you've heard here tonight, you probably couldn't make it up, but the size of the book today has sold over 45,000 copies in Australia. Now, I don't say that to pump my own tyres up. Why I say that is it gives you an idea of the number of people who want information. And they're crying out for information, and they're crying out for experiences that they can relate to themselves or members of their family or their friends or their work colleagues. So hopefully, and look, I know it's made a difference. I know it's made it, and I know it's saved lives. So I got a great email from a guy in Western Australia a few years ago, and he had no idea who I was. I mean, he didn't know me from rugby league broadcasting. Western Australia's an AFL state, so he'd never heard any of the broadcasts of the rugby league that I'd done. But I got a letter from him, email, and he said, "Thank you for your book. I read it 12 months ago, and because of it, my two sons have a father today." So when you get mail like that, they're heart moments, not head moments. That doesn't affect you on a thinking level, it affects you on a heart level. And so that encourages me to keep doing what I'm doing. I'll finish with one story. I'm just checking on the time here, David, so that we do have a chance to do some questions, if you would like some questions. I suppose the thing that keeps me doing what I'm doing, the why, if you like. I think if whatever we do in life, one of the great questions you can ask yourselves is why? Why am I doing this? I know why I'm doing this. I mean, so when you're clear in your mind about that, then it immediately becomes less of a load to carry. And I get tired doing a lot of speaking. I do. I get sometimes I get a bit ragged, and the number one priority is then I've got to take a step back and look after my mental health so that I'm okay to look after my family, to be able to work and do a job and then continue to speak. So it's very important in that respect. But I'll just share one story. I first did one of the very first presentations I did, or speaking engagements, if you like, was in Newcastle, and it was at the West Leagues Club, and it was a panel discussion, and I spoke as well as the panel. We had a panel, a few of us, there was 2 or 3 speakers. I was one of the speakers. And bear in mind, this was 15, 16 years ago, so there wasn't a lot of people talking about mental health issues and mental illness at the time. So we put this night on, and it was a free night to attend. And I'm thinking to myself, who is going to go to this event? You're putting a night on to talk about depression. Who is going to go? It will be friends and family. So we will have no one there. So it was at that stage I thought, well, look, at the very least I can do here to play my role as far as getting this message out is to go on the radio and actually be interviewed about my story. And I told the story about depression that I've told you tonight. I didn't mention the bipolar stuff at all. I just talked about the depression and how it had impacted on me and all of those symptoms I talked about. And I said, I got to the point it got so bad I was suicidal. Now, while I was on the radio, a man rang the station, and the producer, who's on the other side of the glass in the studio, she took the call, and this guy said, what he's talking about, this bloke on the radio is talking about right now, he said, I'm there now. He said, that's me. He said, I've been I'm chronically depressed at the moment. He said I've been suicidal 4 or 5 times in the last 3 years. My wife doesn't know, my kids don't know, my employer doesn't know, there's none of my mates who know. I haven't been to see a doctor. And the girl who took the call, the producer, said, look, you've done the right thing here. This is the first step, and it's a very hard step that you've done, but you've made the call. When Craig comes off from doing his interview, he'll have a quick chat to you. And this bloke said, I can't do it. It's too hard. And he hung up. And by the time I heard this story, when I'd come off, the producer was very upset. And she said, look, I've just had this bloke on the phone and he's told me that he's suicidal and he's been like that for 3 years. No one knows. And by this stage, it didn't shock me because I'd heard all these stories. I'd heard all these stories before. And I said to her, I said, that's what we're dealing with. I said, this guy's not a statistic. He's not one of those 1 in 4 Australians who experience a mental health problem in their life. We don't. How do we measure him? We don't even know about him. We don't even know about him. So the next night, we actually had 150 people turn up to the event at Wesley's Club. And at the end of the night, a girl who would have been about 16, I think she wouldn't have been any more, she was walking towards the front of the stage, and I was standing down the front, just in front of the stage at West's. And she walked up and she was really upset, and you could see she'd been crying. She still had tears in her eyes. And she came over and I just said, look, I said, I can see you're upset. I said, have you got depression? Has this been a bit of a hard night for you to come to? And she said, no. She said, I don't have depression. She said, I'm fine. She said, but I've just come here tonight to say thank you, because the man who rang your radio station yesterday was my father. And I've never forgotten that story. And that's the why for me. See, that's not a brain moment. That's a heart moment again. And they're the ones that change lives. A conversation between two people can change a life, and it can save a life. So never underestimate that. So I make a count of, make it my business just to ask how people are going. And really, I'm really interested in how they're going, not just how you're going and then move on. You know, I like to make eye contact with people when I see them, and I've got a pretty good antenna these days to see how people are going. And it's just that, it can be just that one conversation and point them in the right direction. It doesn't mean becoming a full-time 24/7 carer or counsellor. It can mean just giving that little bit of impetus to say, yeah, well, I've got your back, but you need to do something if if this situation continues. There's no embarrassment in having a mental health problem. I well and truly left any embarrassment from my own point of view behind 15 years ago. So telling my story today is, it's water off a duck's back. It really is. I don't have to bother, and I don't worry about what anybody else thinks about my story. Number one, I got no control over it anyway. I got no control over what anyone else thinks about my experience. So why would I bother worrying? I put my head on the pillow every night, and I sleep soundly. But I'm always conscious of my own mental health. Each day, a little check-in to see how I'm going. And I still see a psychiatrist every 6 months, whether I feel good or not. And that's just a check-in to see, well, it's a second opinion. I can turn up and say, I'm fine, I'm going great. And sometimes my psych will say, no, Craig, I think you're running a bit high. I just think you're just that little bit high. And I think you need to just take a step back. And it's good to get that. It's good to get that. I think, David, I've probably gone about the 40-minute mark. So, mate, I might bring you back in. And if there are any questions, either feel free to ask any yourself or Patrick. Go right ahead.
Okay. Thanks so much, Craig. I've certainly heard about your story, but I've never heard it firsthand, Craig. So thank you so much for being so honest and transparent with all of us. Look, I'm assuming that we've got quite a few coaches, other team officials and club officials of clubs online tonight. And I think that you've touched on it already, but if I can just maybe get you to summarise again. If you're a club official and in particular a coach, and we should never underestimate just how significant a coach can be in the life of particularly a young player, and you've got a suspicion that something's just not right with this player that's under your care. Have you got any suggestions as to how a coach should broach this issue? Because it's certainly not easy. So maybe if you just got some advice, that'd be great.
Yeah, look, it's a really tough one, and the coaches who just do such a fantastic job, not only as mentors, but spending time with kids and with junior teams on a football basis. But in an area like this, it's even greater responsibility. What I would say to any of the coaches is that be aware of changes in behaviour, first of all, changes in behaviour. So you might have a kid in your team which sometimes is the life of the party, sometimes one of the outgoing, confident kids, and then within a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, becomes withdrawn or lacks that confidence, doesn't want to engage, doesn't look you in the eye when you're having those conversations. That is a sign. That is a sign that there's been a mood shift by the same, and that withdrawal, that social withdrawal, and that can be for any kids in the team. So they're the signs. I think the other important thing on this is that you address these issues within the whole team, the context of the whole team. First up, in the way that you would get the group together and say, look, mental health is so important these days. It's very common. We're here as coaches. There are plenty of support services around, for you if you are struggling, and certainly come to me as the coach. And again, that doesn't mean you're a 24/7 mentor or the counsellor. If one of the kids comes to you as a coach, at least I can refer on here to Headspace, to a psychologist, to a psychiatrist, to a GP. Check with the player that, look, are you okay if I talk to mum and dad about this, that you're struggling? I would certainly go down that path. These conversations, though, when you're concerned about one kid particularly, it's a one-on-one conversation. It's not a conversation you get the whole team around and say, Ben, I've got real concerns about your mental health, mate. How are you travelling in a team situation? Because I'll just shut it down straight away. So look for the changes in behaviours, and look for missing training sessions as well, just not turning up. For kids that are regularly good trainers and they're not there, maybe a phone call just to make, just touching base. They could have an injury, but it's always good to, just touch base and see how they're travelling there. So it's a difficult question to give a more expanded answer than that, David. But I think as our coaches become more aware. They've got at least it's front of mind. At least it's front of mind in their consciousness that, hey, I've got to keep an eye on these boys and just see how they're travelling, and make it, have one night, have a 15-minute chat about it to the team. Just use a couple of examples. There's plenty of sports men and women, high profile, elite athletes who have experienced mental health problems. Plenty of them. And so there's some examples out there as well that you can draw on. I hope that's helped you out a bit there.
Yeah, that was good. So we've had a couple of questions very similar to that, Craig, and I think your response is spot on. What I'd probably add to that from years of also coaching kids is that just consistency is so important. Making sure that you're providing an environment where kids feel comfortable to raise issues with you as a coach, and that can be that can be difficult if your approach with kids is inconsistent, and there's any inkling of an environment where they don't feel welcome or perhaps they lose trust. So I think that's really important. If you're wanting a kid to be honest with you about something that is deeply troubling to them, as a coach, you need to be consistent and make sure that you provide that environment. So look, I'm going to leave the chat open for a little bit longer. We are approaching 7:30. Is there anyone else that's in attendance that has any questions? Okay, well, look, Craig's been kind enough to allow us to record tonight's session. So we're going to have this on our website and our Facebook page for about a week. If there's anyone that's in attendance tonight that perhaps doesn't want to ask a question in this setting, I just encourage you to send the question through to our email address, reception@northernnewsouthwalesfootball.com.au. We would be more than happy to refer those questions to Craig, and also through to our other partners, Lifeline and Talk to Me Bro. So please, if you think of something in the next couple of days you didn't feel comfortable tonight, please do not hesitate to raise it, and we will do our very best to come back to you. I'm just going to finish up tonight by once again thank you, Craig, for taking part in Mental Health Round. This is an area that we're committed to, as I said it before. Football is a significant part of so many people's lives, and we want to just make sure that we're caring for the football community. And this is clearly an area where we know that there will be people within our community that are struggling. So the brighter the light we can shine on this area, the more advice that we can provide, in particular about where to go and get help, the better. So just a really important message to everyone that is listening tonight. If something that Craig's said has had an impact on you personally, please reach out. Patrick's given you the details of Lifeline. I can't think of a better organisation for you to reach out to than Lifeline, or go and see your doctor, or just speak to someone that is close to you. Be bold, and please, don't internalise and suffer, because I'm sure that there will be people on this panel tonight or attending tonight where some of the things that Craig said are really going to hit home. And he's given us a lot of things to think about, but for me, the number one is, don't suffer in silence. Do something about it. Otherwise, you could end up in a similar situation to where Craig was going back 20 years ago. So, Craig, on behalf of Northern New South Wales Football, on behalf of the football community, a sincere thank you to you. Patrick's just put up a reminder of the Lifeline line. It is 131114, and you can call that any time, day or night. So, Craig, thank you very much, mate. Your time is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Thanks for participating, everyone. As I said before, the care that you are showing in your clubs to get on board tonight and hear what Craig's got to say is greatly appreciated. Thank you.